Hey folks, Jack from Moonshift Audio here. In this week's video, I'm going to be taking you through the entire production process for a track that I produced with Tokyo-based artist Kinoco. I've been working with Kinoco off and on for a couple of years now, and he's kindly allowed me to show you under the hood for this track. For a lot of these tutorial videos, I actually have to make a sketch of a track to show you how to get that sound, and for time reasons, I can't go to the same level of detail and polish that I put into a commercial release, so it's a real treat to be able to show you this project, which ended up with over 150 channels. Here's a little preview of Need to Know.
Slip away, break the line of sight. Taillights hanging in the air tonight. This is real. Take the wheel. Daylight, take flight. Away from this life. It's out there, somewhere. Give it one more try. Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost? Tomorrow.
Need to Know is out this week. If you want to hear the track in full, I'll put a link in the description. Make sure you check out Kinoco's other music as well, because I think he's really smashing it at the moment. Before we jump into the tutorial, I just want to introduce myself quickly. My name's Jack. I'm a UK-based producer and mix engineer. I put out a new video every week, so please do like and subscribe. If you are producing retro, electronic or experimental pop music and you'd like to work with me, you can get in touch at moonshiftaudio.com or on social media. But for now, let's jump into Cubase. Okay, here we are in Cubase. Let's get stuck in. We'll take a quick listen to the intro of this track. Now, you might recognise this from the 80s drums video I did a while back. I just put together a few very simple synth pads to go in the background of the drum sound that I was demonstrating. And I actually felt like after I'd made that tutorial that the little sketch that I'd made really had legs. So I developed it a bit and then I presented it to Kinoco, who liked the idea, and this track is what came of it. So for that reason, I'm not going to go into loads and loads of detail about this drum sound because I've got a whole video that you can watch about making this exact beat. But we'll pull up battery and you can see here it's mostly made up of classic Roland drums. You've got the 707 kick paired up with an 808. The snare is a 707. There's a clap with that as well. 707 hats. And these big claps with a big reverb as sort of impact claps are from a 707. There's a few crashes, which are actually the same clap that I've pitched down. And you can see this one's pan central, this one's pan slightly left, and this one's pan slightly right. Just helps to add a little bit of interest to our stereo field. And if I solo the drums, we can take a quick listen to the pattern that I've programmed in here. It's pretty straight. It's not really swung at all. Dead on the beat. It's quite robotic. It is a sort of very 80s drum machine style drum beat, and this is what it sounds like. Now the main character that we get from those drums is from the reverb, and you can see here I'm using the RMX16 with a bit of distortion and EQ on it. And again, this is something that I go into in my video about non-linear reverbs and big 80s drums. So I'm going to leave it there and we'll take a very quick look at the synths. So I've got this Brontosaur, Pad Patch and Diva. And to start with, that is literally all we got. I'm taking a little bit of the lows and a little bit of presence out here. It was just a tiny bit muddy. And if you want to hear what it's like. It was fighting with the vocal a bit, I found, so I just dropped that down. I'm also using a flanger just to add a bit more movement. You can hear that little kind of whistle. If I activate this, widens it, just gives it a little bit more of an interesting texture. So this is basically the background for our intro and into the first verse. And before we bring in the vocals, I'm just gonna show you a few other things that I've done. So I've got another battery here, which is going to quite a big reverb send. And what I've got are 3 tambourine sounds. And if you want to have a look at the reverb that they're going to, it's this drum big verb. And that is a Lexicon 480L on a large hall preset. Snare ballad hall feels appropriate for this track. And I'm using these tambourines as just a sort of impact, really. Now, we're all familiar with using a crash cymbal as an impact. You know, you can denote the start of a bar or the start of a section of the song. And that is a really, really classic tool for a live drummer. You know, you finish a fill maybe, smash the crash, and then that lets everyone know that you're entering a new section of the song. But that can get a little bit dull. And when you're producing a song in the box like this, there are so many other options available to you. So in this case, I'm using a tambourine hit with a real big reverb tail. It's much softer, it's a bit more moody, a bit more atmospheric. And particularly at this time in the track where there's not much going on, there's loads of room for that big reverb tail to just play out. As the verse goes forwards, we can see that I throw a few more of these in. Got one of those big reverb claps there. Little roll here. You can hear that again. And you can hear the panning coming in there as well. And those slightly different textures just really help to keep it interesting. You can hear the bass is coming in here, and the bass is Diva using a pretty simple preset. We can have a quick listen to that. The bass isn't a big part of this track. It's just there to fill out the low end. I didn't want a really interesting, complicated, modulated bass line. I just wanted something to really sit in the back so that the melodic and vocal elements can really shine. I'm compressing this, doing a little bit of a fundamental boost, taking out some of the mud. And there's a chorus on there. Love this Juno chorus. We can hear that if you want to hear it without the chorus. And now with. Making it wider and just adding some modulation. So instrumental wise, that is everything for the first verse. So we can take a quick look at the vocal. Now, Kinoco did an excellent job with these vocals. He comped them, he tuned them himself, and what he sent me was just absolutely ready to drop into the mix. So at this stage, I did do some very, very basic processing, but we can take a listen to this lead vocal completely dry. I've bypassed all the effects.
Swaying in the 4 a.m. light, ready to leave it all behind in a city.
There's perhaps a tiny bit of low end there that we might want to scoop out, but you can see here, what I really want is just to bring it up a bit and level, so I threw an RVox on, which is a great way to get some basic compression going without having to think too hard.
Swaying in the 4 a.m. light.
So we're getting some level boost out of that. At this stage, I don't mind because it is quite quiet. I'm scooping out some of the mud here.
Lost a memory. Hand out,
and then at the end of the day, this is a 80s power pop track, so we really need some reverb on there. And I've just dropped, for the purposes of getting this quickly into the arrangement, a vintage verb. This is the default preset as I loaded it up. I pulled the decay back to 1.5 seconds and pulled the mix back, and so it now sounds like this.
4 a.m. light, ready to leave it all behind in a city.
And if you want to hear that in the mix.
Swaying in the 4 a.m. light, ready to leave it all behind in a city. Lost a memory. Hand out, trying to hitch a ride.
I might be tempted to boost that just a tiny bit, put the level up, but at the end of the day, as a bass level vocal to work this production around, 3 simple plugins, not doing very much with any of them, is enough. We can take a look at some of the other elements here. You probably heard there's a whisper going on. Now, this is an idea that we had quite late on in the production. I felt like there was just these 2 big gaps in the vocal, and an echoed whisper just felt like a neat way to kind of emphasize the moody drama that we had going on with this track. It's quite heavily de-essed. Really boosting the high end, adding a bit of saturation, and then obviously a huge vintage verb. Again, I think this is the stock preset, 4 seconds, really huge reverb. So if we want to hear that, I'll bypass all these other effects. We can keep the vintage verb though, because that gives it so much of what it needs. You can just hear it's really got loads of muddy low end, and that's really going to build up when you have a big reverb on it like that. So if I then activate those effects, now it's got that shimmery whisper that I was looking for. At this stage in the arrangement, the only additional vocal parts that we've got are some doubles to emphasize certain lines in the lead vocal.
Ready to leave it all behind in a city, lost in memory.
I have put no effects on these doubles at all. They do go to a doubles bus, which has got an RVox only. And really, we're just working those with the fader. Just volume is all you need to get them to sit in the mix. So we can play that out, and that's going to take us into the first bridge.
Hand out, trying to hedge your right. Diamonds on the edge of your eyes, lines are blurry.
Can hear those doubles just adding some width.
Shift gears, dry tears in the blink of an eye.
Okay, so along with the lyrics, the track really does shift gears at this point. We start to add a lot of energy. So I'm doing that in a large part with the percussion. So percussion is just such a great tool for adding energy and life to a track. If you want to give your track a lift, I can always recommend throwing some percussion in there, be it additional hi-hats, tambourines, shakers, wood blocks, wherever you want to go. You can go with like electronic percussion. You know, there are so many great synthesized percussion sounds that can get pretty out there and weird, which I love. But in this case, I kept it pretty simple, and I've gone for hi-hats and tambourines. So take a look at these. So first up, we've got Skaka, which is a great instrument from Clevgrand. And I'm using this not as a tambourine, like I just said, actually as a shaker. You can hear I pan that slightly to the right. It's got its own reverb built into the plugin. And I just have to draw one long note to get this. You sort of choose the pattern that you want it to play within the plugin. I've also got another instance of Skaka, which is doing these kind of tambourine rolls.
Dry tears in the blink of an eye. Fast lane, clean.
And I've also brought the hi-hats into the drum pattern. 2 slightly different hi-hats, just to keep it a little bit interesting. If I solo the drums, we can hear that. And now you're starting to hear those 3 detuned cymbals, which are falling on the same beats as the new chords, which we'll hear when we get to the synths. So I'm going to play the track, and I'm just going to take out the shaker and the tambourine.
Shift gears, dry tears in the blink of an eye. Fast lane, clean slate.
And now I'm going to bring them in.
One more try. Shift gears, dry tears in the blink of an eye.
You can hear that even though it's quite low in the mix, it just adds a real lift to the track. It doesn't have to be loud, it can just sit in the background, but it's a certain sort of energy, bit of urgency that you can get from those sort of quiet, subtle percussion layers. I love it. So another way of adding a lift to this track is by developing the bass a bit. So I've got the same bass patch here, bass 9 from Diva, but I've opened up the filter a bit. So if we hear coming from the verse, here's the slightly quieter, slightly wide chorus bass. And now we get the main bass. Now I haven't put a chorus on this, so it kind of shrinks back into the center and tightens up a bit. But you can hear it's much brighter, there's a lot more mid-range presence there, and that's just from opening the filter there. And I've also got the same exact notes being played on a Serum synth here, which is just playing literally a sine wave, and that is just to add some extra low end weight. So if I play you without that, and now I'll bring it in. Just helps to fill out the very, very sub area of that bass. Okay, so when it came to the sort of main keys parts, which will really kind of blow this track open when we get into this bridge, I pulled a little trick where I'm actually using two patches that are similar but not identical. One panned hard left and one panned hard right. And what you get from that is this huge, rich kind of sound stage that actually still leaves a bit of space in the center for something like your lead vocal. So take a look at this one on the left. Both of these are instances of Diva with similar but different sounding patches loaded up. It's actually quite a thin sounding synth, this. And if we listen to the one on the right, they're quite similar sounding. This one's obviously got this huge kind of flanging chorus on it. And I'll play them both together. Love that huge width that we get there. If I was to, I'm just going to duplicate one of these and I'll pan it central. So if we hear, this is just one of those chords panned central. Compare that to the two slightly different patches panned left and right. Oh, just so much better. Love that. And with our drums, bass and rhythm section, we can have a look at the vocals, which are actually pretty much unchanged. You can see here that we've still got the lead vocal and our doubles, and that's about it. So it sounds like this, everything together.
Shift gears, dry tears, in the blink of an eye. Fast lane, clean slate. Give it one more try.
Okay, so we're getting into the first chorus now, and this is a great example of what I love about collaborating with people when it comes to arrangement and production. My instinct at this point was to take things up another notch and really open up the track and go harder, but Kinoco suggested some changes to the chord sequence and to actually strip the track back. And what we came out with, I absolutely love. So we've got this big riser, the drums are building.
Give it one more try. Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost? Ooh, tomorrow doesn't need to know.
It's just such a wonderful break in the energy, and it's a little bit unexpected, but it's beautiful. And so we lose all the drums, we lose all the bass. And I decided to go for an absolute classic DX7 80s kind of keys patch, which is from the Arturia DX7V. Ah, so soothing. I've layered that up with one of the same synths from the pre-chorus, but I've panned that to the center. So now it sounds like this. I also put a bit of an attack on the envelope so you get that nice soft sort of brassy whoom at the start of each chord there. And if we listen to those both together, the main sound is that FM keys from the DX7. But if we bring in just thickens it up, gives it a bit more presence. So we've dropped out a lot, but we're also adding in quite a lot because we've got effectively 2 new key sounds. And this is the point where the vocals really start to come to the fore. You can see here in green quite a few harmony tracks. So we're really all out now. We've got the lead vocal, we've got 2 pairs of doubles, and then we've got these harmonies. So it sounds like this.
One more try. Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost?
Also got that beautiful ooh, which there are 4 layers of in the background here. Kinoco very helpfully time aligned all this for me before he sent it over, which saved me so much time. Just to show you what I've done with these harmonies, I've got 2 pound left, 2 pound right.
Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost?
And I've deliberately kept those notes separate, so 1 note is doubled on the left and 1 note is doubled on the right. Just helps to keep a bit more space in the centre. Then I've got you can see with these lower harmonies, I'm only panning them left and right by 31. So they're sort of sitting slightly closer to the centre. And then the last pair of harmonies are actually in the centre.
Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost?
So all those harmonies together.
Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost?
And then we've got, just to finish it off, 1 more pair. Which is playing actually a bit more of a complex melody. So if we layer all of that up.
Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost?
And now Kinoco's added even more.
Tomorrow doesn't need to know.
So we're really getting into sort of choir territory here. And if we pull in the doubles and the lead vocal.
Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost? Tomorrow doesn't need to know.
Moving forward.
Yesterday you gave up, saw the odds and had to fold.
We pull the drums back in.
Doesn't need to know.
And we've also got this really nice arpeggiator. Now this is a plinkophone patch from Diva, and I've literally copied the exact same MIDI data from the chords that are playing, only I've dropped a MIDI arpeggiator on. So if we want to listen to this, this is without the arpeggiator, but with. And I've thrown a phaser on that. And it's also going to this delay send, which I'm widening out as wide as it will go if I turn off that stereo widener. This really helps to throw that out to the sides. I actually really like using stereo enhancers on effects returns. I feel like sometimes when you put them straight on the instrument or the sound itself, it can start to sound a bit fake, but by blowing just the reverb tails or the delay returns out wide, it's a bit more of a subtle effect, but it still gives your track a beautiful width. So we've got this nice arp element, got our drums back, and we're moving into this beautiful repeated vocal line.
Doesn't need to know. It doesn't need to know. It doesn't need.
So we're getting now to what might be my favourite element in the whole production. When Kinoco sent the vocals over to me, he mentioned that he'd had a play around with an idea for an epic kind of Jacob Collier inspired choir just on this one line. And when I loaded the audio in, I had a great time playing with it. Here's the end result.
Need to know.
And we can take a look at the elements that go into making this up. So down here, we can see that I've got another great stack of vocals. I've got the initial sort of high harmony. and then various different So to get the kind of slightly spacey phasing effects, the first thing I did was bust these all together so I could control them. And to get this kind of swelling effect, I've literally just put a gain plugin on that track, which is just slowly boosting the volume of those to add that kind of rising effect. And then I've got a stack of different effects on here. So I've got a compressor, a radiator, which is sort of like pulling them all together, giving them a little bit of extra harmonic content, an EQ, giving them a little bit of a mid-range boost, and then the gain plugin on the end, which I'm using again just to give us that sense of a rising, increasing volume. That bus is then going to a couple of effect sounds. The main one, which is adding a lot of interest, is this Valhalla Room. It's just a reverb sound on 100% wet, but then I've put a Phase Mistress, the Sound Toys phase plugin, to really modulate that reverb return. And then I've compressed that to sort of squash it all together and keep it really high in the mix. It sounds like this. And the last thing I wanted to do with this was to just automate a little delay throw so that this sort of fades into the start of the second verse. So you can see here, this is my send level to a delay, which I'll now unmute, and we get this lovely sort of tail. So we listen to all of that in the context of the mix.
It doesn't need to know. People here are frozen in time. Does it lead you back to your mind where the feelings always waiting?
So we're well into the second verse now. Not much new. The bass is still there. Kept that initial pad from the beginning and the center panned synth playing the chords from the chorus. I've also carried over the arpeggiator from the chorus into this verse, but I've just duplicated the instrument so that I can have independent control over things like the level between the chorus and the verse without having to do automation.
It leads you back to your mind where the feelings.
Drum wise, we've stripped it right back. We've just kick and clap now. Up until this point, that clap's always been hidden behind the snare drum, but by dropping the snare out we just get a slightly different kind of tone out of it.
Always waiting.
Now we bring in the main drums again.
Slip away, pick the line of sight. Taillights hanging in the air tonight. This is real. Take the wheel.
To take this track up another level, we really want to have some kind of live instrument. So we got a session guitarist involved, and they sent us a few different options for elements to add in to the verses, the choruses, and then a real juicy treat for the end of the track. All the parts he recorded wet with effects and completely dry, and that was really, really helpful. These sort of picked parts that he played in the verse, I ended up using the wet version. It sounded like this. This is completely dry as it came. I sent that to a bit of reverb, and I put a delay on it as well, just to push it back in the mix a little bit. Then there's this line that I really love. I actually ended up taking this last note from another part of the thing and time stretching it out because the line wasn't exactly how I wanted it. It wasn't leading into the chorus how I wanted it. So I just did a bit of a cheeky sort of hatchet job. But in the mix, you don't really notice that. We can hear it.
Take the wheel.
You probably heard there that classic dramatic 80s tom fill. I've got a whole video on how to make exactly that tom fill, down to the choice of samples, the drum machines that they come from, and even a few samples that I recorded myself for you to download. I'll put a link to that down in the description. And that tom fill leads us neatly into the second bridge. So we've got additional elements coming in to lift it even higher than previous. So we've got a tambourine, which again is from Skaka. Really great instrument for getting natural sounding percussion. The main drums aren't changed, neither is the bass, although I did open the filter ever so slightly more, just to give it a tiny bit of a lift there. We've got the same two synths, panned left and right, playing our big impact chords. And I pulled the same trick here with an arpeggiator playing those same chords. This is another instance of Diva on a nice sort of keys patch. And I've only used that on the third chord of the sequence that sort of covers bars 3 and 4 of every loop. Just keeps things moving, pulling things in and out like that. We've got some additional guitar parts. There's this kind of arpeggiated part, which I put right in the back. And some strums. Now for the strums, the affected guitar that was sent for this wasn't quite right for me, so I used the dry guitar and I threw it into a guitar rig, really just adding some gain through this jazz amp and pulling out all the low ends. And this is what it sounded like without. No harmonies in at this point.
Daylight, take flight away from this life. It's out there somewhere.
And now we get into the second chorus.
Do you ever feel like you keep running from your ghost? Tomorrow doesn't need to know. Yes.
This is about as big as the track gets. So I've opened up the filter a little more on the bass so that that comes through a bit stronger, adding every keys part all at once. So we've got the DX7. The chords are a bit softer from the verse. These panned left and right ones. So now we're really getting an enormous texture. That's some 80s power pop right there. And we layered that up with both arps. Again, this is all playing the exact same notes. Every one of these parts, the arpeggiators and the main sort of synths are playing the same exact notes. So this one's a bit more mid-rangey, and this one's a bit more plucky. They just help together to really fatten it up, and then we end up this enormous rhythm section. We've got a few more strums here. And for these ones, they're basically the same, but I did use some of the chorus from that jazz amp just to help kind of wash it out a little bit. We've got harmonies coming back, and have a quick listen to those.
Do you ever feel like you keep running from your goal? Do you ever feel like you keep running
Again, these are the same harmonies
Do you ever feel like you
from the first chorus.
from your ghost?
And we've got some oohs. Have a quick listen to those.
Ooh, ooh.
These were just sent once, but you can see that I've copied them over multiple times. But I actually had them going all the way through this chorus to begin with. But I felt like it was getting too busy, so we stripped it back.
Tomorrow doesn't need to know. Yesterday you gave up, saw the odds and had to fold.
So they only come in every other few bars.
Doesn't need to know.
Got ad-libs here, which are heavily tuned, heavily compressed, and EQ'd really quite thin. If we listen to these, we can have a look at the sends in a second.
Ooh, from your ghost, no. Tomorrow doesn't need to know.
So you can see here that I'm automating the amount of send.
You had to know. Tomorrow it doesn't need to know.
So we only get this enormous great delay and reverb for the ends of the phrases. Otherwise it was just way too much.
Ooh, from your ghost, no.
And the actual sends themselves, we've got the ad-libs delay, which is just an echo boy, and then this enormous reverb, which is just a nice vocal haul from Valhalla. So we're really sort of getting there now. We're almost done with this track, to be honest. But there is one more treat, which is a high gain guitar solo. When I talked to Kinoco about how we wanted this to go, I was keen to have the last double chorus at the end of the song really, really just explode. I want it to go through the roof with some kind of real cheesy 80s drama, 80s energy. And we talked about kind of layering up a really enormous vocal, but that isn't really Kinoco's style. So we decided we had to go somewhere else, and that was actually where the original idea of getting someone in to play a guitar part was, because we thought, right, a high gain guitar solo would be the perfect way to give this song a lift. And Devin, the session guitarist that Kinoco found, really delivered the goods. Take a listen to this.
But tomorrow doesn't need to know.
If that isn't the perfect way to end an 80s power pop production, I don't know what is. We can take a quick look at this. I've literally just rolled off the subs and scooped out a bit of mud in that. The way that that was delivered to me was just, oh, I was so happy when I heard it. We can hear that on its own. I think I sent that to a tiny bit of reverb. But the delay, everything else was baked in. And that's about it, I reckon. That's it for this week. If you found this video useful, please do like and subscribe for more tips, tricks, resources and downloads from me at Moonshift Audio. Till next time.